Thank you, Carleen Davis, for that powerful song. Many will remember her as a freedom fighter and as the former wife of anti-apartheid revolutionary and political leader Nelson Mandela. Winnie Madikizela Mandela passed away on Easter Monday at the age of 81. And here to help us look at her legacy are Charge d'Affaires of the South African High Commission, Philip Riley, and political scientist and Pan-Africanist. He says he's just a human being, Professor Rupert Lewis. Good morning. Welcome to Smile Jamaica. It's morning time. Philip, I'm going to start with you. From the South African perspective, we know from a Jamaican perspective how we view Winnie, but from a South African perspective, how is she viewed?
Well, you know, she's generally revered for a role as, I think, the most visible South African personality throughout the struggle for freedom and democracy in South Africa. At the time, there was government programs in place to ban and banish ANC leaders, and Winnie managed to remain in the public eye throughout that period. And you know, she carried the torch of freedom through many years of oppression, where she was also you know, subjected to solitary confinement, banishment domestically, where she wasn't allowed to engage with more than one person at a time, and even then it was restricted. So you know, I think there's, in South Africa, really a fundamental appreciation for the role that she did play in keeping that torch burning throughout all the years of oppression.
I think, Rupert Lewis, a lot of people don't recognize just how much she's been through. I think because a lot of what we've seen has been through media, so maybe they've seen maybe just the latter part of the things she's done. Many don't know she was also incarcerated, also separated from her children. As a female figure, how important is that? Because a lot of times when we talk about our Pan-Africanists, you know, the men are forward, but as a woman, how significant?
Yes, as a woman, 491 days solitary confinement between 1969 1970. And not long ago, that book came out because somebody had her diary from her days of confinement. So a book is available on these 491 days. But as Philip mentioned, the banishment, not being allowed to see more than one person at a time, the enormous toll this took on her personal life, on her family life, on, I think Lorna Goodson referred to the fact that she must have suffered from post-traumatic syndrome.
Absolutely.
With the intense pressure of living under a white supremacist state and seeing her people being crushed in the way she was. She was certainly the outstanding figure out of prison, as well as a person who was also imprisoned, banished, and so on. And I think the Western press has been very poor in its appreciation of Winnie Mandela, because no one mentions the fact which is documented in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission Report, Volume 2. South Africa had a chemical and biological warfare program that's documented, and with capacity to poison milk, cigarettes, and so on. So you're dealing with a systemic approach to the oppression of Africans, and therefore there's no comparison between whatever Winnie has been accused of in terms of the issue with Stumpy and a system of violence which included chemical and biological warfare, and which led in that period, 60 to 94, the period of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission coverage, to some 2 million people in the region below Zambia being killed. So it's you know, you can't compare whatever
our own experiences. I think when we think about freedom fighting, we put our own experiences, and we don't understand how difficult it really was.
Extremely difficult.
Philip, for all South Africans, in that moment, I'm thinking of her legacy and just how people view her now, and the things Rupert mentioned, the things that were necessary because of the climate that was in South Africa. How much has Winnie's actions helped to change some of that climate today? To even force things like truth and reconciliation to happen?
Yeah. Well, I think that's where her major role has also been carried throughout her life. You know, you mentioned earlier the fact that she was a woman, you know, of substance. And that's something which in a patriarchal society, which many of us still have, you know, she was an independent woman before she met Nelson Mandela. She was a successful woman in her own right. She had been the first black social worker in South Africa by the age of 21, you know, so she'd already had a good record of achievement in her own right. She carried that throughout the years of struggle, and then post democracy, post the struggle in a democratic South Africa, she maintained that role of, you know, keeping also the ANC focused on its role as a national leader in bringing people together, in dealing with the issues of the past, also through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and trying to ensure that even in a democratic society, we did not forget that there are those who still remain suppressed, oppressed, that are not able to take advantage of economic opportunities that you know, exist under democratic South Africa.
Even today, Rupert, we find it difficult to separate international leaders from their personal sphere. And I think a lot of people were judgmental of Winnie and Nelson to some extent, that their marriage didn't last. I think they thought their marriage represented the ANC. And that was something that was difficult for her. Do you think also being woman is part of the reason why she probably did not ascend to the leadership of the ANC? Some people feel that maybe she should have.
Yes, well, on the two aspects you raised, the leadership aspect, she did rise pretty high in the ANC as a woman's leader, but the question is, certainly,
not president.
My own view is that she could have done a better job than Jacob Zuma as South Africa's leader. The question of her personal life, I think people are torn. They felt she was done in by Nelson in that divorce. And there are still issues which were outstanding even after his death concerning his will that she was engaged with. So there is a strong feeling that she was treated unfairly. But I would caution on that. The reason I'm not saying she wasn't treated unfairly, it's difficult for relations of a stable kind to continue under those circumstances.
In unstable conditions.
Exactly, in unstable conditions. So,
absolutely.
You know, two human beings and late in life, they decided to separate and divorce, but still maintained communication and contact.
Philip, you get the last word. What will South Africa be doing to maintain this legacy? We've seen documentaries, we've seen films. What do you know of any other plans to immortalize Winnie Mandela?
Immediately, a state funeral that's coming up, a special official funeral, which is dedicated in her honor. You know, she was also a holder of a national order in South Africa, Order of Albert Tuli. There's also a program of activities that the ANC has already announced, the next 10 days of focus on her life and legacy. And I think, you know, as time comes about, more and more will be consolidated, because this, you know, she had been ill for a little while, but I think her passing has caught everybody really by surprise, and tragically so. But, you know, there's no doubt about the impact that her life has had on South Africa broadly, and then the international community, because I think it's also shown that as an independent woman, you, in your own right, you know, you've got your voice is there. It cannot be, you know, shut down. Even with the full might of the apartheid state, couldn't do that.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing with us. Charge d'Affaires of the South African High Commission, Philip Riley, and political scientist and Pan-Africanist, Professor Rupert Lewis. Rest in peace, Winnie.